So you've just written a short story and you're looking at it and wondering, what can I do to superpower this writing? One thing you can do is look at the passive verbs in your story. You can go through your story and circle all the passive verbs. Passive verbs are am, is, are, was, were. These are verbs where a verb is usually about an action, about the noun does something, but this is a passive verb is when the verb, the action, so to speak, is just a state of being. As an example, the moon is round. Moon is noun, is the verb, and so the moon is. The moon isn't actually doing something. It is just, its activity is a state of being, and so this is a passive verb. Now, a lot of the times when we normally speak, we use passive verbs all the time. It's part of casual language and in writing, but when we're writing, we want to use an enhanced form of language. We want to introduce more activity to it. So one thing that happens a lot is we'll say the dog is running, and to enhance that language we can just say the dog runs. So we've taken out the passive verb is and just say it much more simply and with more of a sense of active action. The dog runs. So when you say the dog runs, you're emphasizing activity. You're giving more of a sense of motion and things changing. It will make your writing more exciting and interesting to the reader. And I'd say about at least when I do this, about a fourth of the time, it makes the writing actually simpler, because instead of saying the car, so and so is driving the car, just say so and so drives the car. You've stated it more simple and with more of a sense of action. If you're writing fiction, you're usually doing it to excite the reader in some way. If it's an action story, you want them to be really interested in all the changes that take place in the struggle. If it's a romance, you want to feel like that romance is going through stages, and there may be some obstacles to the romance, and that things are happening and changing. And so when we want to convey, if we want to make our reader more excited with our fiction, one great way to do this is to write in a way so that all the verbs convey action and not just a state of being. When it's passive, it's just a state of being. You reduce that sense of things happening and things moving and things changing and activity. You make it seem more like things are just in one state or another. So as an exercise, go to something you wrote, a short story, something like that, and go through and first write this list down. Write am, is, are, was, were. And this is your passive verb list. And then go through your short story and circle all of them. And then you want to go back and you want to figure out the best way to turn each of those into an active verb. What I do is I first, become aware of all the passive verbs, and then I go in and see how I can change it into an active verb. And only then do I ask myself, well, would it actually work better to use a passive verb? Now, fiction is also all about contrast, so you don't just want action all of the time. You want some parts of your story to be passive. Sometimes it is better to say the moon is round. The dog is sleeping. You can make it seem even that more somnolent to describe the dog the dog sleeps actually conveys a little bit more activity than the dog is sleeping, and that makes it seem even that more restful, that much more sleep-like. Doing this, going through and trying to switch out passive verbs with active verbs can be a lot of fun, because all of a sudden you're introducing all of these exciting verbs to your story. So all of a sudden your story has all these words that are full of action and add a lot more interesting elements to the language you're using. They can still be very common words, very well known. It's a great way to add a lot more flavor, a lot more variety, and describe things in a much more particular to what you're trying to tell in your story. You can tell it in a much more particular way. It's good to first really get a knack for switching out passive verbs with active verbs. Really relearning all those verbs you know, and realizing the great variety of verbs that are being neglected and can be used in your storytelling, and have fun working out the puzzle of the way you need to switch the sentence around and change it and say it in a different way in order to use an active verb. And after getting really good at doing that, then you can decide the times when it would probably be better just to use a passive verb. Like in dialogue, if you're writing, if your characters are speaking, a lot of the times you want them to speak the way they would speak in real life, and people speak using a lot of passive verbs. When you want to create a still spot, you can start using passive verbs, and it will create a sense of casualness and sort of like stepping back, taking the foot off the pedal a little bit before you know, if you have parts in your story where it slows down a little bit and the action mellows a little bit, that'll make the next revving of the engine, the next increase in activity, the next building up of the struggle, even that, it will make that seem that much more exciting. I really enjoy reading Don DeLillo, and when I've read his work, it's really interesting the times when he chooses to use active or passive verbs. I can really get a sense of how he's finessing his writing in a very subtle way, in a way that can still come across as very easy to read writing, and yet it has amazing amounts of depth to it, amazing amounts of subtle, poetic conveying of deeper feelings, and it's really great to see his use of passive and active verbs. Now, if you're writing a story in past tense, it's a lot more likely that passive verbs will work their way into your story. The police were here. The siren was loud. Just because those were and was are verbs that also describe past tense. And so there might, when you're writing a story in past tense, it might take a little bit more of strategy about how you're going to describe something. You could say if you say the police left here hours ago, you still are saying that the police were here. You're just doing it in a way that conveys more action. Switching out passive for active verbs, I feel like I'm discovering the way language is put together, the way it's these puzzles, and when you're working out these, they become like these these riddles that you can take apart and put together in different ways, and it turns writing into this discovering a little bit more about what language actually is, and all the unending possibilities of how things can be described. I don't know about you, but my all-time favorite writings that I have ever read are ones that are spoken so simply, so in a way that everyone can understand, and yet there's just something about the writing that it's such great writing, and at the same time it seems very casual, very simple, and active verbs at play in the writing. This is a great way to produce that kind of writing. Most of the time, when we're thinking about descriptiveness and adding details and flavor and adding character to the story, we don't think of verbs, but actually verbs are a great opportunity to convey personality and the kind of, not just that it is a something, but what kind of that something is it. And we can bring a lot more about what that town is like and what that person is like and what that situation is like. We can do that in our choice of verbs. Go forth. I hope you have a great time working out the riddles of language and finding all kinds of new ways of telling your stories and making your stories much more full of action. I want to thank everyone for leaving comments. It's really very encouraging to me and to all of you. Thank you very much. If you want to encourage me to make more of these tutorials, please hit the like button, subscribe, and leave a comment. If you have anything to say on this subject, or if there's something that comes to mind that you think someone who happens to be watching the same video might get something out of, the world became a little bit smarter. And also, please, if you have time, go and check out my illustrated fiction in video form. I post it for free at solomation.com, and one of the greatest ways you can make sure that I'm going to hurry and make another one of these videos is to go check out that page, watch one of my episodes, and when I see the stats go up, I know that these video tutorials are working, and I will continue to make more and more and more of them. I hope your writing goes great, and have a good day.